There's an ocean of pure, vibrant consciousness inside each one of us. And it's right at the source and base of mind, right at the source of thought, and it's also at the source of all matter.
You know, I don't think I know any people who actually like the system as it is. Not really. There are people who profit from this system and want to keep it for that reason. There are people who understand it's flawed, but think it's the best option, so we might as well keep it. Basically, it's bad, but we don't have an alternative. But is there no alternative? When I've asked this question, people usually get locked into this false dichotomy. Oh, so you don't want capitalism? You think communism is so great? Why don't you talk to someone who survived the Eastern Bloc and you'll see how great communism is? I've heard that response more than any other, which is troubling, because I didn't ask, is communism better than capitalism? I asked, is there no alternative? Why is it so hard for people to answer this question? Well, according to Mark Fisher, it is easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. It's been a while, and I'll be honest, I've been struggling lately. Does anyone else get the feeling that human history has been, accelerating? Like we're all stuck on a deranged merry-go-round run by some elder god carnival staffer, and we're all just hanging on for dear life, trying not to hurl? Okay, I said merry-go-round, but I meant carousel, like the graphic at the beginning of the video. Realistically, though, the only difference is that one is powered by feet. This will not be the only mistake I make in this video. I don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing right now. What sort of future should I be preparing for? Like a Star Trek future? Or a Mad Max future? Or maybe Minority Report? The way this last year's been, it's probably Dune. But even before this timeline tilt-a-whirl, there's been a common feeling that something is wrong in modern day, that something about the way we go about our lives feels bad. This sense of deep unhappiness is hard to describe, which leads one to ask, well, what's wrong? And there are a lot of people offering answers. Some will tell you that this unhappiness stems from the disconnection to the purity of our ancestors. You'll see this a lot at the root of arguments about degeneracy, that our once pure state has been corrupted by something. It's usually atheism or the Jews or trans people having human rights, whatever. But you also see cries of degeneration in clean eating movements and anti-vaccination circles. I, for one, got the Pfizer vaccine, and my 5G internet has never been faster. Degeneration is something people have been freaking out about for thousands of years. Every generation seems to have a you damn kids in your rock music moment, and claims about human degeneration aren't based in scientific fact. But a different type of answer focuses on the systems we live in, that the problem isn't humanity, but the systems we've created around us, which is the type of answer Mark Fisher offered in his writing. I made a video in 2017 about Mark Fisher's theory on the slow cancellation of the future, and I got a lot of pushback in the comments from people really oversimplifying his ideas. Far too many responses dismissed Fisher's theories as just another aging punk opining the loss of his subculture's relevance, but I disagree. Fisher was trying to offer explanations to big questions like, why is it at a time of unprecedented technological achievement, when the whole of human knowledge is at our fingertips, when we live longer than we've ever lived and have more entertainment than we've ever had, why is it that so many people are so unhappy? And is it the participation I'm just kidding, he didn't say that. The problem with big philosophical questions like this is that the answers are often just as big. And for many, there's no satisfaction in an answer that's too hard to understand. People want simple answers because simple answers are usually actionable, like you can do something about it. If the problem is just that liberal elites are trying to turn us all into robot slaves with vaccines, or that Black Lives Matter is trying to form a gay communist world order, well, okay, hey, let's get the bad guy. People make a lot of money these days selling answers like this to people who aren't educated enough to understand anything more complex. And that's not meant as an insult. You should be able to go about your life without risking becoming totally detached from reality by some asshole profiting off your descent into madness. Anyway, this video is about Mark Fisher. Okay, before we continue, just a quick recap. Capitalist realism is a term coined by Mark Fisher. It means a state where people can no longer imagine a world without capitalism. And before you disregard me as another libertarian socialist here to lecture you about rising sea levels, capitalist realism is bad even if you think capitalism is good. So put that in your pipe and smoke it, Jeff. Mark Fisher, also known as K-Punk Online, died in 2017. But his blog is still up, and you should visit it. He wrote several books, including Capitalist Realism and Ghosts of My Life, which you should read. But as someone who is often paralyzed by the all-consuming demonic carnival of modern life, I get it. So here's the short version. Fisher writes a lot about the modern world and how it affects our lives, like how we see the world, our mental health, and how it changed our culture. One of his most famous examples of capitalist realism is about music and how at the beginning of the 90s, music innovation began to slow down and eventually stop. This coincided with the fall of the Soviet Union, the last true experiment with communism in the West. And according to Fisher, this wasn't just a coincidence. Okay, so for the last 100 years, music continued to change and evolve, and each decade had music that very clearly belonged to that decade. It is music of that time. So if you hear, you think that's probably the 1920s. Here's the 1950s.
Go, cat, go, but don't you step on my blue suede shoe.
And here's the 1970s. Etc. But what is the sound of 2005 or 2013? I have no idea, which is weird because, I was there. I mean, gun to my head, I could always look up the pop charts for that decade, but there is no sound for the early 2000s. It has no identity. Let's take two examples, Lady Marmalade and Party Rock Anthem. Which of these songs came out in 2001 and which came out in 2011? I know that Lady Marmalade came out in 2001 because it was a tie-in for the movie Moulin Rouge, a movie I saw in high school and made very cringy videos with my friends lip-syncing to that thank God never made it to the internet. That places it into the historical context of my very cringy life. But if an alien exploring the ruins of humanity heard these two songs, there's not much that places either definitively anywhere in the 2000s. The 80s has a sound to it. You can feel it. Even the 90s has a sound, but the 2000s and onward just has a collection of songs that came out during that time. So many of the comments I got from people were arguing that the 2000s had a sound by naming bands they remember from that time, but that's different than the phenomenon Fisher writes about. That's just you remembering something from your life. If you heard a song from the last decade that you hadn't heard before and had no memory connected to it, could you tell me if it was from 2001 or 2011? Fisher thought that the current state of capitalism creates a huge amount of anxiety in people that keeps them trapped in thinking only about the present. This bogs down culture, people, artists, and therefore artistic innovation. Where previous generations' lives were characterized by boredom, ours is consumed by stress and being in a constant state of escalation and panic. This tracks for me, especially in work. It's so commonplace for a boss or supervisor to email or text someone at 2 a.m, and workers know that not responding immediately can get you in trouble. Now imagine that same scenario happening to a man in the 1940s. Hello, Gerald, it's Bob from the office. How are those expense reports shaping up? All right, I want them on my desk ASAP. It sounds ridiculous, or something reserved for extreme circumstances like firefighters or the mayor, but it's a normal part of work for people all over the world right now. We're never switched off. We're never totally disconnected from the workplace, and what's worse, disconnecting is viewed by many companies as selfish, luxurious, or a sign an employee doesn't really care about their job. And that's just insane. So if the future is what we make it, and we don't have the time or energy to imagine the future, then the future may as well not exist. If we can't reach the future, this leaves us just repeating the same culture over and over instead of creating something new. You can see evidence of this repetition everywhere. An example I've noticed is men wearing nail polish, like young men on TikTok using this as a way to rebel against conformist gender roles. And, it's great. It's really great. It's a positive step in the right direction. but it's also one we've already done before. This was the subversive rebellion of the 1980s and continued in popular culture into the 1990s. And yet, only last year we had this uproar about Henry Styles wearing a dress on the cover of Vogue.
Yeah, his name is Harry Styles. I said Henry, it's actually Harry. I live in a swamp and I do not follow celebrities.
It's just so bizarre. It's like we're repeating the same pearl-clutching outrage like we've never seen it before. David Bowie, Prince, Boy George, Kurt Cobain, Marilyn Manson, all enormously influential artists who directly rebelled against masculine conformity, some of them nearly 40 years ago. The people upset grew up with this in popular culture. But still, they're repeating this outrage, this pantomime of shock as if this is new and a sign of some scary change we've never seen before. This form of amnesia is disturbing because younger people only have our memories and experiences to build on. They shouldn't have to fight the same battles we did all over again, and yet that appears to be what's happening. When Mark Fisher describes a loss of a decade's sound, this is part of that phenomenon. He describes the 2000s as a blocked or clogged time, as if the cancellation of the future had caused previous decades to smash together like a pileup on the freeway. But music and art, these are just symptoms. They're the canary in the coal mine that warns us of a bigger problem. So the idea of capitalist realism is hard to address because you first have to get someone to understand what capitalism is, which is harder than you might expect, trust me, and why it doesn't work, or that it works kind of temporarily for some people before inevitably collapsing. You know, honestly, outside the leftist enclave I usually skulk in, I don't think people even dislike capitalism. People just want capitalism to work in the way they think it's supposed to. They want it to work the way it was sold to them. Unfortunately, the way it works isn't a bug, it's a feature. And Fisher knew that. A capitalist system only works if you can guarantee constant exponential growth, that everyone can just keep extracting and working and building wealth up and up and up into infinity and never stop. This is, unfortunately, total fantasy. It's a delusion we tell ourselves. And capitalism's dream of exponential growth inevitably bumps up against the real limitations of the planet. The fact is, you can't mine forever. You can't extract exponentially. You will eventually deplete and pollute your resources to the point where the system is forced to stop. And yet so many people ignore this basic fact. Like tech giants have people believing that we're really going to get to Mars and that's going to solve our problems. Earth is this incredible, rare paradise in the cold, deserted oblivion of space, and these dingbats are acting like Mars? Oh yeah, just as good. So the problem isn't just capitalism bad. It's people losing the ability to think outside its boundaries. When people try to think of ways to change things, they continue to pull examples from the past, communism, feudalism, tribal societies, but ignore the possibility that we can and should create a new system. The future can have a system we've never seen. It can be unlike anything we've done before. We don't need to escape to the past to solve our problems. We need to reboot the future. Thank you for watching another video about Mark Fisher and stolen futures. If you subscribe to my Patreon, I will endeavor to make more videos like this and also pay my electric bill. Until next time, team. Bye!